So I've got this Ecoflow Delta 2 Max that I use in my car for car camping. And this thing is great. It can run my heated blanket and it can run my dehumidifier I keep in here, because when I'm using the propane heater, this will make it humid, and run lights, charge my phone, any other things that need power. The problem with it that I have in the car is the charging speeds. If you're using the cigarette plug adapter, this is limited to at most 8 amps at 12 volts DC, which realistically we're going to be a little higher, probably around, let's say, 13.5 volts. That only gives us 108 watts. As you have the options with configuring this at 4, 6, or 8 amps, but no higher than that. Which is unfortunate because some vehicles, like this one, can have more than 8 amps on the 12 volt DC cigarette lighter plugs. With this unit being 2,048 watt hours, if my calculations are right, it would take almost 19 hours to fully charge this with the provided power source. Now, Ecoflow does sell what is their alternator charger, where it hooks directly up to your car's electrical system right off the battery and can charge this with up to 80 amps at your car's voltage, which is definitely a massive improvement. The problem with that is its cost. Now, yet it does provide some cool functions like being able to backwards charge your vehicle in the event that your car battery dies. I cannot justify the cost of that unit, especially when I wouldn't be using it at its maximum capacity anyways, as I don't want to throw an extra 80 amps on my car's alternator when I'm already running things like subwoofer and extra lighting. I don't want to be loading the alternator that much, so to pay that much for something I'm not going to fully utilize is not something I wanted to do. However, I need to fix the slow charging of this, and we can still do that for cheap, which is what I'm going to be doing today. Using these here. These are XT60i connectors. Now, this is the connector that this uses, and you can plug up to 2 of these into the back. Now, when it's using the car, it's limited to 8 amps because it knows it's using the car. The way that's done is with this center pin here. If it's connected to the positive or the negative or nothing, I can't remember the exact specifications, but that will change what this reads the connector as, therefore changing its charging input. So with it right now, it's limited. However, these connectors are also what can be connected to solar panels, and you can charge up to 15 amps each. So in total, we could be pulling 30 amps from the vehicle. That would take us from the 108 watts to 405 watts, which is a massive improvement. That cuts our almost 19-hour charging time down to just over 5 hours, which that means just a simple outing in the car of going to get food or material or supplies would regenerate a lot more power back into this unit. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Now let's explain how we're going to do this. I bought these XT60 connectors, which I've got 2 of these, and get 15 amps out of each, or 30 amps in total. I'm going to do a test run first to make sure that these are set up right, where it's actually going to be pulling more than the vehicle limited 8 amps. To make sure that these aren't going to drain my battery, I want these to only be pulling power when the vehicle is on. Therefore, I'm going to be adding a relay where the relay's coil will be on only when the ignition of the vehicle is on. I'm also going to be fusing this at 30 amps to keep things protected. Now, I should be ideally running this all the way back to the car's battery. However, I don't want to do all that. I currently have a subwoofer already ran to the back of the vehicle using this here much bigger wire. That subwoofer is getting its turn on signal and what will be the coil of the relay from this cigarette lighter here, as these are only on when the ignition is on. So I'm going to be still using all of the subwoofer's connections to charge my Ecoflow Delta 2 Max. These large conductors are already have overcurrent protection from a fuse, so we don't have to worry about adding to this, as this is already fused for this conductor's size or smaller. This is number 4 wiring, so it can handle plenty of current, and this is currently fused at, well, I'm not actually sure. I do know that the fuse that is in here is much smaller than it could be. This might only be a 40 or 50 amp fuse, and I think this is good for up to 80 amps. Long story short, the fuse protecting the wire that goes back to the subwoofer is already sized smaller than that wire and could be sized much bigger, so that's all protected. We're just going to be adding this 30 amp fuse to protect the new wiring we're adding for this. So I'm first going to do a test run, and I have this heat gun thing plugged in, which is only actually drawing 300 and something watts. Because this is fully charged, and because it's currently fully charged, it's not going to accept as much power coming into it. So if we have some load on it and drain it a bit and have power on it, this should help it take more current in, which that's now at 471. So I'm going to open these up, and I'm very temporarily going to install these on this battery. And see how much current this will take in. Okay, so one is plugged in. And we are taking 169 watts in. So that's a good sign. That means that this is not limited to the 8 amps of the car charger, that the positive or the negative is actually connected to that center pin, and that's how it communicates what the cord's ampacity is. I saw another YouTube video explaining how this works, so that's where I got that information from. So make sure to check any videos out on these XT60 connectors if you're interested in how they are set up. Okay, I've got the second one plugged in here, and we are now charging at 320 watts. That may end up being more if this battery was at a higher voltage, or if this was more depleted, or if we had more load on it. Any of those factors might bring it more up to that theoretical maximum of 305, but this did prove our theory that these connectors will allow us to take much more current than our car's limited. So I've taken the things out of my way that were in my way, and I now still have pretty bad access. I'm going to see if I can pull this subwoofer forward at all. So the first thing I've done here is disconnected the ground from the sub where it did connect to there, so that we can work on the terminals without shorting anything. So our very first connection coming off our power source, which is going to be our subwoofer terminals, but essentially our battery, very first thing is going to be our fuse. So I got my fuse holder here and a 30 amp fuse that I'm going to install. And now with the fuse holder here, the end that's going to need to connect to our sub, I'll strip it, or first I'll cut it, then strip it, and it's then going to need a spade connector. So we'll crimp that. The other end will also get stripped. That's going to connect to our switched side of the relay, which, looking at this here, we're going to want to be on normally open, meaning when the relay doesn't have power, it'll be open. But that could also be the common terminal, so we'll need terminal 30 and normally open, which is 87. So 87 is blue and 30 is black. So we'll be connecting this to the blue, and the black, that'll be our normally open switch, which will only be on when the ignition is on, therefore only charging the Ecoflow and taking power from the car's electrical system. The car is on. So let's start with the black here. So then our blue will be the power continuing to our XT60i connectors. However, we're also going to need a negative for the relay and a positive for the relay for the coil. So looking at that, that is 85 and 86. So 85 is white and 86 is yellow, which is the two smaller colors. Those are the two smaller wires here. They don't specify here which is positive and negative, so I'm going to put yellow as our positive. So I'm going to take a little bit of wire here, and this is going to go on to where our turn on signal to the subwoofer goes, and will also be the relay's coil. And now our white will be the other side of the relay's coil, or the turn on signal. So that's going to be our negative, which will go to the vehicle's ground. So I'm just going to take a little length of this, enough to reach the ground where the subwoofer's ground is. Because if I can connect things directly to the vehicle and not the subwoofer, if I can help it, I might as well. So that will get this eyelet here. And the other end, of course, is the negative coil side. Now blue will be the normally open side we're using, and the red will be something that we won't be using at all. So I will tape that off. Okay, so it turns out some of these aren't heat shrinking, but that's fine, as these aren't going to be exposed to where it's going to be wet. Anyways, but we can connect what we currently have now. I'm first in here with a stubby, undoing our positive terminal. It's unfortunate this is in such a difficult spot to show, but our positive connection is now made. So now I'm going to make our turn on signal, which I just realized is actually going to need to be a splice. So I kind of have screwed that up a little. So we just need a positive. This is the remote turn on signal, which comes from that cigarette lighter. So our negative's capped off. So we just need to tap into this positive here. So I'm going to put it in with a butt connector and just reheat shrink around it. Okay, so this is put together now. So this is the turn on signal, plugs into the subwoofer and goes to the relay's coil. So this will get heat shrunk down, and then I got this actual piece of heat shrink to cover it all. Okay, so that's all made up now. So this remote turn on can plug back into the subwoofer. Okay, so I got that plugged in. I'll have to tidy this up and mount it somewhere. Our negative will mount down where the same negative for the subwoofer goes. So now all we have to deal with is the output from the relay, which will be the positive to our XT60i connector, and then we'll have to make a negative to the XT60i connector, which again will just go where our subwoofer negative is and our relay coil negative is. Okay, so now it's time to make the connections up to these guys, which firstly, these need to not have these ends on them. So I'm going to cut those off. And I'm going to strip each of these. Now I've twisted two of these together and put them in the connector, and I'm just going to be running one 12 gauge, which will cover the 30 amps total. In a building, 12 gauge isn't, because you have a code that is saying if it's 10, 12, or 14 gauge, they each have their own set limits for current, regardless of your temperature column. However, if you were actually to look at the table and not apply that other code, usually 12 gauge will actually handle up to 30 amps fine, which in this case, for this short run, it's going to be okay to handle that much current, and we're not based on building code. And now these are each going to go back on our 12 gauge black and red. Okay, those are solid. Now I'm going to crimp down that. Now I'm going to heat shrink that down. So I got enough out that I will be able to, that I've now cut, and will go to where it needs to go. And I got this big piece of heat shrink to go over our conductors. This piece may not fully shrink small enough, as it's a pretty big heat shrink, but we'll see. Okay. One of these will need an eyelet to connect to ground, and the other one will go to our relay. Okay, so firstly, this is now all done up, and this is done up to the other side of the relay, so I should be all good to push the subwoofer back and put all three grounds back together. So I'll do that first. Okay, so I've got all three negatives and grounds. I've got the one for the subwoofer amplifier, the one for the coil of the relay, and my one going back to the XT60i connectors. Okay, so I've got this here. I've got plenty of cord, since this will always sit down in this area. So I got my two XT60i connectors, and I've got this all fastened up along here, going down behind the speaker. And I should be able to plug this into the Ecoflow, and it should not be getting anything right now while the car is turned off. So I'm going to take each of these here. That's one. That's two. Okay, so something's wrong here, because I'm getting an input. I think the relay's backwards. What I thought was normally open is actually normally closed, because now that I turn the car on, it's not charging anymore. so I'm going to switch that blue wire out for the red wire. So I'm going to be switching this blue wire that comes off of the relay to the positive of the XT60i connector out for this red one. Even though the instructions show that that was the normally closed, maybe they were talking with power on, something was different. I didn't test beforehand, so now I got to change it. All right, I've now switched it around to the red wire, and there's no input going in there. Okay, so now it's time to once again test if things work. So this seems to only be wanting to take in 160 watts. I'll plug in the electric blanket. That's only like 100 watts. Plug in my light. Not that that's anything more than probably like 8 or 9 watts. Okay, so 115 watts going out. It'll sustain that for 12 hours. Oh, 11 hours. Okay, let's turn on... I guess I could put the dehumidifier on here too. I think this thing's only like 30 watts or so. I actually just got this thing. Thing's got lights too, I guess. Okay, so that's running. So we're up to 157 watts. Let's turn on the ignition here. Someone will say I'm faking it, so I have to keep this as one big clip. Okay. Car's running, so alternator's making power just so I don't kill the battery. Okay, yeah, that's good. So we're now pulling 300 and almost 50 watts, and theoretically that can go up to 410. Let's make sure the subwoofer still works, because I screwed around with that thing, so let's see if it still works.
It's going to be your chance to win a
14 volt.
Anyone not playing commercials? Yeah, it's working. Okay, so subwoofer's still all good. All right, so that's a job done. So it'll be fully charged within an hour, and obviously we've got way more wattage coming in than out. And I think maybe if we were down to less percentage, like we're at 92%, so it's probably is going to slow down on the charging. But again, theoretically, you know, let's throw a bigger load on it. I'm going to put this electric space heater in. I don't use this in the car because these are so inefficient. That's why I use the propane heater, but just to put some load on it and try and see what this will actually pull up to. Okay, that's just on setting 1. It's not on. There we go. Okay, so our output's gone up. Maybe I should put this on setting 2. That's high heat. It still doesn't want to turn our input up any higher, I guess. At a certain level, I'm assuming it'll put the input higher, but either way, I'm happy with that result. It's even if it doesn't go over the 400, even if it just limits to 350 here or whatever, it's still a lot better than the 108 I had before. But either way, I think it probably will go higher, but even if not, this is still good. Most importantly, this didn't cost me like $600 or $700 Canadian, however much the alternator charger would be. This cost me under $100. So much better bang for your buck as far as I'm concerned. As 30 amps is still pretty decent. Yeah, those wires aren't too hot at all. And this is great, as I don't even have to ever plug this thing into the wall or take it out. As far as I'm concerned, it can stay in the car, and it will just always be charging when the car is running, which is great. That's what I wanted. And charging faster than, of course, this limited to 108 watts is kind of useless for something this big. 18, 19 hours to charge is too long. All right there, guys. Well, that's this project. So that's going to be it for this one. If you did enjoy this or got anything out of it, make sure you give a thumbs up. If you do have any comments or questions, feel free to leave those down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the channel, make sure to subscribe. Also, if you are interested, I do have an Instagram account at Pickle700 where I've got bonus stuff and stuff posted earlier than you'd see it on the YouTube channel, that sort of thing. Alrighty, guys. Thanks for watching.